in our marriage. I think I was very lucky in the sense that Riva was quite open. She was not making her diabetes very private. So she also wanted to teach me. I found it very confusing in the beginning. It was very confusing. Riva would train me. Sometimes she would come home and she would open the door and she said, "Quick, if I look pale and my blood sugar is low, what will..."
Hypo, and that could be by keeping a safe distance. It could be by making sure maybe they have had a glucose intake and then waiting and making sure they're safe. It could be alerting somebody to their sugar reducing because you can see it in their eyes and you kind of take that preemptive action.
At night during her sleeping, usually to prepare for the hypo fit, I was surprised when the complication start to happen to Anita for her eyes and her complication. Anita had her eyes sugary when the youngest son still a baby. She could taking care of the baby after the surgery. I had to take care of the boys.
Welcome to Global Diabetes Insights, your go-to podcast for navigating the world of diabetes. I am Tino, a certified diabetes educator and a global advocate for non-communicable diseases.
And I'm Kona, a global advocate and a medical doctor. Together, we're your hosts, dedicated to raising awareness, fostering open discussions, and creating a safe space for everyone affected by diabetes.
Join us as we dive into empowering conversations with individuals living with diabetes, caregivers, healthcare professionals, and researchers. Our goal is to not only guide you through effective diabetes management, but also to inspire advocacy for proper healthcare access.
So get ready for a journey of insights, ideas, and diverse perspectives. Let's amplify our collective voice and create positive change. Get involved, get engaged, and join us in creating the change we need. So welcome everybody to Global Diabetes Insights.
Welcome everyone to an absolute epic and special edition of our podcast. So today we have not just one, but three incredible gentlemen joining us from around the world. I'll ask you later to introduce yourselves. From Indonesia, we have someone from Northern Ireland and United States of America. Now, what makes today truly extraordinary is that these three men are amazing husbands to three fiercest diabetes advocates in the world. So they are here to share their journey as caregivers, as partners, and champions for their wives who happen to be living with type 1 diabetes around the world. And usually we see each other, we connect when we meet at conferences. So we are diving into their personal stories, their funny moments, and the challenges that they face together, and the incredible ways to support their partners. So trust me, this is going to be a roller coaster of emotions, from their heartfelt moments to hilarious anecdotes, and you don't want to miss it. So now I'll ask each and every one of you to introduce themselves to our audience so that they hear from you, not from me. Maybe we'll start with Bao. Over to you.
Okay, thank you for having me, Tino. So my name is Boudewijn. I'm originally Dutch, but I live here in Brooklyn, New York. October 5, it's my wedding anniversary with Riva Greenberg. We got married in 2001. Riva has had type 1 for 52 years. She already had it almost for 3 decades when I married her. So I'm coming to you from Brooklyn, New York.
Thank you so much. Now I think jump straight to Roger.
Hi Tino, I'm Roger. I'm married to Dawn Adams. We live in Northern Ireland, not too far from Belfast. And Dawn has had diabetes for over 30 years. And I've been with her throughout that time, from before it as well. We met in school. She's the reason I'm here today.
That's great. Thank you so much. Now I think we move to Rio.
Hello everyone, good morning, good evening. My name is Riotanto. You can call me in the Rio. Living in Jakarta, working in Jakarta in the Sumatra area. After I married in my wife 17 years, I have to step by step in learning, and right now very understanding. I have 2 boys.
Thank you so much everyone for being part of this podcast. You're always in the background. Usually we are seeing your wives doing the work. Those are the people that are known in this diabetes community. But today we thought maybe if we just have to go to their partners, to their caregivers, the people that see it all. We might not see everything. We see only their victories, but you know everything, thick and thin. So thank you so much for being part of this podcast. Let's make it a discussion really, so that we can know we see these things, so that it will serve as an encouragement and inspiration to the people that will see this, those that are yet to be married, those that are already married, so that, they can actually be empowered by whatever that is we're going to be seeing. So I think maybe the first question that I have for everyone, whoever wants to jump straight can just go in and just just answer it. Maybe the audience would want to know, what were your perceptions or your understanding of diabetes before you met?
I can start. So my understanding was very, I would say almost absent, very basic. But there were two incidents in my school life. In the second grade of my high school, there was a boy in my class, and suddenly he was not there. We learned from the teacher a few days later that he was in hospital because he had diabetes. And we went with a small group, we went and visited him. So this must have been either 1972 or 1973. We met him and he was sitting in the bed. He had a big smile, but he lost a lot of weight. He explained he had diabetes, and then he showed us this big syringe, and I was horrified. And he said, I am learning how to inject it myself. So that was one incident. And then later when I was at the university, which was in 1977, I was at a study group, and there was a girl there. But when it was exam time in December, she was there. She had done the exams, actually gone to the hospital because she was diagnosed with type 1. And I remember my mother had said to me when we were visiting with our study group at her home, you can bring some chocolates. There's special chocolate for people with diabetes. And she seemed to be doing quite well. So when I started, Riva and I were friends first, and she was never hiding her diabetes. When we would have dinner together with a group or so, she would put her syringe, but I knew nothing. I didn't know what carbohydrates were, whether I knew what rice or potato was, what it would do to the body, no understanding.
I had a similar experience in school, but a good friend of mine, he had type 1. He would have gone to a loo a lot. He sweated a lot, indications that, he did not control diabetes. I knew nothing about facing up to diabetes and control of it. I just knew through him. He was the reason I then knew later in life when Dawn had type 1. So when I met Dawn and when she was my girlfriend, she didn't have it, but it was just a few months before she graduated that she got it. I recognized the symptoms and told her to go to the doctor. That was because of that knowledge. That's why it is so important, this improved knowledge, improve people actively managing the condition.
I met with my wife and she taught me, yes, I am to diabetes. And then I looking and searching what the diabetes. And then I have a learning. And step by step, I find the doctor solution. Yeah. But I very worried. If it happen in the hypo, I waiting to the boy, number 1, 3 years. I meet in the doctor and show. Yeah.
Thank you so much for everyone for sharing your perspective. It's usually different. We might not have as much knowledge when this thing started. And so many people, even today, people have struggles. People do ask questions. Some of them they'll not be resolved. They'll not be answered because diabetes is really unique. What you might hear or maybe what you might see in your family would be different from what you experience as when you get married. So thank you so much. How has type 1 diabetes impacted your marriage on a day-to-day level? Were there any surprises or challenges, which I understand there are? If you could share with the audience how diabetes impacted you and your marriage.
Riva and I got married actually in 2001, and of course we were dating. We were friends for some time, and when it became really serious between us, naturally as a student, I'm very curious about life in general, so I started to study. That I found it very confusing. In the early part of my life, I naturally wanted to support her. I'm Dutch Indonesian, so I grew up in the Netherlands in a Dutch Indonesian family. The family is more central than the individual, as it were. So if one person has a problem, everybody has a person and everybody wants to help. I grew up with 2 grandmothers in my household, so as grandchildren, we were also kind of helping our grandmothers. Particularly my sister was very good at that. And that was also my natural inclination in our marriage. I think I was very lucky in the sense that Riva was quite open. She was not making her diabetes very private. So she also wanted to teach me. I found it very confusing in the beginning. It was very confusing. Riva would train me. Sometimes she would come home and she would open the door and she said, quick, if I look pale and my blood sugar is low, what will you do? And where do we keep it? I would go to the kitchen, get the glucose tablets. In the beginning, I remember that her blood sugar would go low in the middle of the night. She would have to take some glucose tablets and she would open the plastic and it would wake me up. Before we were living together, I don't like to have interrupted sleep. I get irritated and all that. But surprisingly, when that happened and it would wake me up, she was trying to be very quiet. I heard myself say, are you okay? Is there anything I can do? Sometimes I needed to get up to get some orange juice for her, but I didn't get irritated. It was very interesting for me. I said this to her a few months into our marriage, I said, normally I get irritated, but it doesn't. And I think I'm teaching that I'm being taught loving someone else. It's just much bigger. It rises above those little irritations. There was not a sense that it was just her condition, her disease, but there was a sense like we would do it together. So sometimes she would strategize with me, my blood sugar is this, we're going to eat that. What do you think? How many units I should take? And so that was partly my education, but also she was sharing.
Well,
Incredible.
There have been a few different phases over the years, certainly back in the early days. Initially, we weren't married. There came a point where I would maybe recognize signs of low blood sugar before Dawn did, a look in her eyes, or just not being quite on the ball about a response maybe to something. I think that kind of thing comes with experience, spending time with people. Also, the nighttime, like you're saying about, that is when your own awareness is obviously at its least. Quite often, that is when hypos can happen. It is something I think naturally, I used to be a fairly sound sleeper, but I would be a lighter sleeper now, and that's partly because I was on edge maybe about Dawn maybe having a hypo. Maybe I'm reinterpreting that because we also had 4 boys over the years, and that doesn't help the sleep either. But I would identify the early time, which was gaining experience, not having that many tools at your disposal, and having perhaps more volatility. We then did a course, I'm not sure if this is that's worldwide or if it's just in the UK, called Daphne, Diet Adjustment for Normal Eating. That's a worldwide thing? Yeah. That made a huge difference. Rather than her taking a set amount of insulin prescribed by the doctors and eating to keep up with that, it turned it on its head and said, right, here's what you're eating, so here's the insulin you need. And Dawn was very good at dedicating herself in those early days of that to get into the way of the experience of guesstimating almost what insulin she would need. That made a huge difference because suddenly we found there weren't as many hypos. We also found that prior to that, if you're out for a day trip or you were just out doing something together and you might decide, we'll just have our dinner out, or we'll just go to the beach, something, whatever it was. But you had to always think, now, hang on, do we have the means to manage hypo? And that, after Daphne, was suddenly a little less of a burden. And then the new era has been since she's had a pump. She has a pump and the continuous glucose monitor and does the hybrid closed loop. Essentially, that has taken a lot of, I suppose, off me in a way, because her control is greatly helped by that system.
Thank you so much, Roger. And I think now we got to Rio.
What's scary most is when my wife experienced hypo at night during her sleeping. Usually to prepare for the hypo fit, I was surprised when the complication started to happen to Anita for her eyes and her complication. Anita had her eyes sugary when the youngest son still a baby. She could taking care of the baby after the surgery. I had to take care of the boys while Anita recovering.
I'm not really an emotional person, but this is authentic, this is natural, this is non-fictional, this is something that has happened. So thank you so much for sharing that with our audience so that people would know, because there will be other people who might have gone through that too. And I don't know if you know, the world knowing them. So we just want to know, how do you support them in their advocacy work? They are doing amazing things. Of course, they have their qualifications, they go to work, they do so many things, but also they do some other stuff. They did get their time to do advocacy work. So the world would want to know how you, as partners, how do you support them in that?
It's a very interesting question, because when I read it, I also, turned the question around, because Riva is also supporting me in helping me to support her. So, for example, I traveled a lot in my work, and usually then I'm overseas. I was a lot in Europe and sometimes in Asia for my work. And I remember I would sometimes call and she wouldn't pick up, maybe because she was not home. But I got a little bit worried, because I had this image, well, could she be lying on the ground in the morning with low blood sugar? So we actually agreed when she would wake up, she would send me an email, and later that became a WhatsApp text message. I'm up. And that kind of helped me, would give me confidence during the day. And actually, I started to do the same thing. We were time zones apart. I would send her a text message. There's also that she's helping me when it concerns in how we do diabetes together. But when it comes to her advocacy work, I come from a little bit of an academic background. I taught at the university in the Netherlands, Erasmus University, a lot. When Riva wanted to do work in diabetes, and particularly around the emotional side, how do you live well? How can you flourish? living with diabetes. And then I sometimes call myself the R&D division, where I would offer her theories or framework to ground her work also in science, because very often she would be talking to an audience with doctors and medical people who have medical credentials. That was one role that I had. Remember when we started going to the World Diabetes Congress, and the first one was in Montreal, which was, I believe, 2009, I became her social media photographer. So I would always make photos. I do that a lot. My role is very often also to strategize with projects that she is doing. Sometimes I hesitate to say I am supporting her. For me, it's really like we're doing it together.
Thank you for being a champion, an amazing partner in the work that you do. So many books have been written, you've traveled the world together, at conferences, sometimes you're together. So thank you for that you do in the background. So now I think we go to Roger. Yes, now I understand that even Dawn, she's in the other part of the country. That's why she's doing diabetes work. So we just want to know how you do it. How do you support her?
Well, I think I struggle as well with that term and wonder, do I support her? But I suppose when it comes down to it, historically, when she was involved in things, I would have been a steady hand with bringing up 4 boys, so she knew she had that covered. There wasn't any limit put on her. I'm proud of what she does. A lot of it is in diabetes-related things these days, but there's always been a bit of a live wire getting involved in things. I'm proud of that, and I do support it. Certainly encourage her. Yes, she would now with the various diabetes things, I suppose, use me as a sounding board, maybe for some of the talk, a wee bit of input with the PowerPoints and things like that. But largely it is keeping things at home steady and rolling on. I have a life too, but she supports me too. It is something you learn over the years, and it doesn't always work out. You can, as best as possible, help each other in your own direction, your own dreams, and part of that is shared as well. I was able to go along to the Stockholm conference with her. I just fell in love with Stockholm. I love it. So there's so many people I have met through Dawn's advocacy work, and I know everybody I've met is just lovely. You've got a whole richness and variety of the human experience there, and that has really helped me as well. Here's an interesting thing. Initially, Tino, you and others were just names to me. You know, a lot of this way back started on Twitter, and I used to make fun of Dawn saying, "Oh, you and your Twitter friends," you know, as if they weren't real people. And then gradually I met them and realized they're real people and they've all got just very positive attitude to life. I just am so impressed by all of you, Tino, and all the people I've met through Dawn's doing, how engaged they are with condition. And I know if it was turned around and I had diabetes, my natural reaction would be to try and ignore it. I think I would have been like my friend in school who ignored it and unfortunately passed away when I was 41 with complications. However, the other side of that is I am married to Dawn and I don't think she would ever have allowed me to ignore it. There is a learning experience for us all in the way, even when we support someone else, we're learning, we're being supported. This is a very interesting angle to take, you know, bring us 3 together.
Thank you so much.
Giving Anita, besides her roles as a mother with our boys and being a caregiver in her time during hospital visit hypo times, because I suggested to her, you must control your blood sugar, and every month laboratorium to 3 months ago, and then accompany her to the hospital or the event. I have to join to event in IDF in Korea, and then I have to together him like that. I have supporting full for the earthly and the life my wife.
Thank you so much, Ria, for that. When I remember like Anita sharing that in Indonesia, the wives are not allowed, if you're living with a condition, like a chronic condition, you're not allowed to travel alone. You need to have someone accompanying you. In other nations, it's really different. So thank you for sharing that with us and for your willingness, because you also have a life, just like Roger says, you also have a life, but sometimes you compromise because she might need you. She wants to do her advocacy work. She's invited to speak. Sometimes you have to travel with them. And I know everyone here has traveled so many times, but in the picture, usually we are not seeing you. You're just doing your own things. Wow, this is amazing. So thank you so much for that great support. Interestingly, I think for us and the audience at large, they want to know, of course, when your wives get ill, when things are not going well, sometimes diabetes is really complicated. Like complications, no matter how well you're living with your diabetes, complications, some of them are inevitable, they will come. And I know that you'll be affected mostly when you're seeing it. You're struggling with that. So we just maybe want to know how you try to maintain your emotional and mental resilience when you're managing these diabetes-related challenges as a couple, how you maintain that balance in your life.
in my relationship, I don't feel I'm being strained on my mental and emotional balance or anything, but it has a learning process on how to live together. There's one example that I would like to share. There was a day I remember as almost yesterday. This was many years ago. Riva was trying to take care of blood sugars and nothing was working. And she was beside herself. She started to cry. She was angry and all that. And I wanted to go to her to give a hug. And she said, no, leave me alone. I'm going to the bedroom. I'm going alone. And I was in pain. I wanted to help. This was maybe part of my childhood condition. You want to be there. And here she was saying no. I felt hurt. I was in pain. A lot of things were going through my head. What can I do? What should I do? But she was very clear. And then a few hours later, she came out. She said to me, when this happens to me, then I just need to be alone. But knowing that you are here for me, that's enough. And that was completely new. For me, the way I was educated, helping, supporting, was doing something. But here she was telling me not doing something, at least in my view, was also doing something. And that was a great lesson for me. So I would say it was a process. I never felt really, I don't have a therapist, but we talk with each other. Of course, I talk with friends. I don't feel I'm in need, but I have many moments where I learned how to be in this relationship, and also how to grow up in a way and change my ways. Just thinking that helping is doing, but here was helping was knowing if I'm there, that would be enough. That was huge for me.
Thank you. That's amazing.
There have been a lot of times, mostly years ago, when hypos are terrible things to witness. I think it's important to be open about that. It can be traumatic, obviously, for the person going through it, but also for the caregiver. It can involve a lot of anger, violence. You've got to have a short memory and also put things in perspective and know that this is the body grappling with survival. You can't blame a person for that. I think you do have to, like Boud says, grow up a bit and accept that, the main thing that you're doing is making sure that that person comes through the hypo, and that could be by keeping a safe distance. It could be by making sure maybe they have had a glucose intake and then waiting and making sure they're safe. It could be alerting somebody to their sugar reducing because you can see it in their eyes and you kind of take that preemptive action. But quite often when somebody is hypo, they behave differently. They take it out on the person that's there, i.e. you. You have to grow a bit of a thick skin. Also recognize that you love this person. A slight against you. There may be doors slammed, maybe things thrown, but the body does what it has to do to survive. It's your job just to manage that, to stay chill. I would say not to increase the temperature of get into an argument or anything like that. Think about each step logically. Is she safe? Are the kids safe? Do they need comforted maybe because they've heard this outburst? And explain, maybe to them what's going on. And also the odd time, very few over the years for me, but the odd time when you need to call outside assistance. The notion of being prepared. Obviously, Dawn is very good at preparing, having hypo treats available, things like that. But sometimes maybe you're not at home. You're in a different circumstance. You suddenly realize you don't have, you need. There was one occasion where we were in that position and I actually had to call an ambulance. It's learning over the years, when that point comes, what you can do and what you can't.
I just wanted to add something here because I feel you're making such an important point, Roger. You were saying the body does its thing to survive. I had also that insight at some point. For a few years, I thought this diabetes thing, this managing of blood sugars, if you can just find out how the variables work, you can control. At one point, Riva and I wrote an article about it. I realized you cannot control your blood sugars. And actually, there is complexity science that supports that. The body does what it wants to do. In the same way that we cannot control our liver or our spleen or our stomach or the temperature of our body, the body is a very complex organism. You cannot control. And that insight for me took also a lot of thinking about that, couldn't she have managed that differently? The body will just do its thing.
Bravo. Amazing. And now I think we could hear from Rio.
For the times when Anita being to hospitals, but I cannot to be there because I have to be the home for my kids. I asked my family to helping to me so I can to visit Anita in hospitals.
So thank you so much for your incredible contribution so far. In the diabetes community, this is one thing that we are usually talking about right now. It's becoming a thing now. We're talking of peer support. We have peer support. We see other people living with diabetes because we believe that there's no judgment whatsoever. You're just sharing experiences. People would love to. You get some support. Just sitting in a room, it's amazing. It brings some healing to people and some inspiration. You see that other people are doing amazing things. Other people, even if for other people, they'll think if you get diagnosed sometime, maybe your dreams would be shattered. If you wanted to become a doctor, you can no longer become one. You cannot be a pilot. But now we're seeing that we're learning now. Due to peer support, we learn that other people are still doing amazing things. Maybe for you, would want to know, do you feel like left out on these things? Would you like to see some more of peer support or partners for people living with diabetes, where we're just getting together as husbands or as partners?
I never feel left out because Riva has so much peer support, right? When she started to do the work, it was the rise of the blogs and the social media. I was just tremendously impressed that there was so much peer support, but I never felt left out. I think what you are doing today, Tino, I do think there is a need for partners to come together like what you have done today. It's incredibly inspiring to hear how others live their relationship with a person with type 1 diabetes.
We needed to hear that. This is amazing. We know we might focus on other things and then some other people might be left out that are actually playing a role, but we want to know like how you do it too, because if diabetes is in the family, it impacts everyone differently. Though, of course, you have a positive mindset, a positive approach to it. I cannot say that it has negatively impacted me. I think it has impacted me positively to get to understand life in a different way, different perspective. That is amazing. That's what we need, right? So now I think maybe we move on to Roger to hear from his perspective.
I have seen the great benefit that the peer support network Dawn has been involved in have brought to her. Also, anybody really involved in it. I'm grateful that she has kind of included me, and I now know a lot of those folks. I definitely see a great benefit in people getting together and talking about their experiences. It's not something I am used to doing. There is no such thing here really as therapy, certainly not for men. There obviously is, but it's not a cultural thing to do. In my last answer, the fact that hopefully you didn't notice it, but I got slightly emotional. That itself shows that there is benefit in talking about it. I think that's a great story of Boud's, to have a track for that within a conference that allows carers to even learn those basic skills, like just bit of advice. No, you're not on your own. One of the big things that has struck me about Dawn, again, involved in the peer support networks, is so many people, when they first engage with that, say something along the lines of, I thought I was the only one, or I didn't know there were other people going through this. So yeah, it's beneficial.
I cannot agree more. Thank you so much. For myself, I got to know people with diabetes after 10 years living with it. So when I got to know them, so amazed. I was like, wow, I can also do something. That's when I started to do advocacy work, because I met other people living with diabetes. So now I think we go to Rio.
I know, never. But peer the support, because Anita put the love to the community and it make her happy. And then peer support the partners, yes. And Anita is working on it through her events. And I meet some the partners of the people with diabetes in her diabetes. I have a clue or idea for the community how to monitor to the control what happened in the future in the healthy.
It's great. I wish we were doing a live podcast. It could have been great. Maybe something to consider later on. But for now, I think you're doing a pre-recorded session. But it's amazing. Thank you so much. I remember driving in a hypo. My blood sugar was actually 2, but I don't know how I got home. I drove for more than 30 minutes. I don't even know how I got home. I'm inspired. The audience will be inspired, especially the partners will be inspired. Thank you so much for that, for the authenticity and sharing all that, opening up to share all that with us. That is amazing. We cannot think enough. And we are not going to talk about the challenges. I think I would want to ask maybe for one advice that you'd want to give to other caregivers, to other partners that may be having to deal with these things. Maybe to deal, I don't know. What is it, that one way that you might want to share with other partners who are also married to people living with diabetes, to their wives who live with diabetes?
I think if you can both talk and share, what has helped me tremendously is that Riva was willing to share and open up about a condition that she had lived for 29 years already very privately on her own. But the fact that she was willing to educate me and share her dilemmas, problems, the highs and the lows, emotional, but also literally, I think that is, for me, that was very helpful. I think also I would say to the partner who learn as much as you can. I think you're together because you love each other. Love is extremely powerful. I do not always feel I'm efforting or that I am prioritizing her over me. It doesn't feel that way because we have this love together.
I think it's very important to engage with diabetes. Don't ignore it. Do your best to be involved. Learn what you can. What I said earlier is don't take it personally when there are hypos and maybe outbursts.
Support each other, being together as long as possible, I think.
Thank you for that. Now we want to understand maybe on cultural perceptions, like how do you think like society views diabetes in your region? It's always different. Even in the same country, from each and every city, the way people see diabetes or even the healthcare systems are different from New York, Massachusetts. It's different everywhere. How in your region, in Brooklyn, Northern Ireland, in Indonesia, how do people think about diabetes? Have you noticed any misconceptions? There are so many in our region. People think that if you eat too much sugar, you can get diabetes.
It's a difficult question because, the US is such a big country. If I think about New York, Brooklyn area, this tends to be a well-educated part of the US, but still there are misunderstandings. So people think that diabetes is diabetes, whether it's type 2 or type 1. And even though type 2 and type 1 are very different conditions. So there is stigma, but there is support groups. So there is understanding, but there's also misunderstandings, misconceptions like it's your own fault that you got it, the notion that you caused this yourself. Those beliefs exist, but at the same time, we don't encounter them so much here because the people we tend to associate with and the peer support groups, of course, are people who are educated, have a good understanding of type 1. But if you look broader in the US, there's a lot of misunderstanding about condition.
I would say there are quite a lot of misunderstandings similar to that. Type 1, type 2 are lumped together. There's a notion that, yes, it's partly been your lifestyle to blame, the reason you got it. And also there's a list of do's and don'ts, or mostly don'ts. Even though Dawn has had it over 30 years, my mother will still say to her, "Oh, would you like a biscuit? Oh, no, you can't have that." That is never going to change, it seems. Still, that cultural knowledge that is long debunked still persists.
Some things will not change, even if people do have an understanding, but they'll still say them, this is really funny. And in a way, it's just amazing. It's really hilarious. It's no judgment whatsoever. It's just amazing. The things that families do talk about and joke around. Say, can you really eat sugar? Knowing that she can actually eat everything, but they'll joke around some things, which is amazing. And I find it funny.
Life in Jakarta can to access her and find in the doctor, medicine and the lab in the city. But if we go to the certain other area in outer Indonesia, from the Jakarta, Solo and Bandung, to very difficult in the situation to find the doctor in understand what's mean diabetes. I will to explanation again, and then I find insulin pen and very difficult in the apothec, I think to find prepare in the insulin cool box to the save in the insulin pen, and then the medicine libre in the sensor, additional in the pump.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So I think now we have reached to the end of our podcast. So now I have one last question for each and every one of you, because so many of these things you have talked about already: community support, peer support. So maybe the last question that I have is to ask about the healthcare systems in each and every one of your country. We'll just start with Bao on this. We understand US is really different with a multidisciplinary system. Your experience in navigating with this insurance, prescriptions, technology, we know they're super expensive in the US for diabetes management. Have there been any particular frustrations or benefits compared to other places you've lived? I know you've lived in the Netherlands. What would you want to share with the audience?
The healthcare system is very complex. We are very lucky that we've always been able to afford insurance. I mean, some people cannot afford because it's too expensive. We live in New York, which means that in New York, there are many good hospitals, many good physicians and doctors. So we have always had access. Nevertheless, there have been frustrations. Like, for example, if you're part of a certain insurance, you may want to work with a certain doctor, but he may not be part of that insurance group. Then you have no access, or you will have to pay for it privately, which is very, very expensive. What has also been very frustrating is how incredibly expensive insulin is in the United States. A few years ago, I went to Toronto on a business trip in Canada, and I bought 10 insulin pens for a total of the equivalent of $260 US dollars. And in the US, that would have cost over $2,000. Factor of 10 times. So that has been very frustrating. And Riva has played a part in the advocacy, and now the price of insulin has actually come down in the US, but it is complex, can be very frustrating. If you don't have insurance, then you're kind of out of the system. That's terrible.
Knowing how much the contribution people living with diabetes actually play to take part in changing the system, changing the narrative, because it's not always great. Even in the first world countries, there are things that we, from our low to middle income countries, we actually praise to say, wow, this is amazing. But also people living in those communities, there are things that they don't see right. They want to see them change so that things will be small and amazing. And maybe from Roger, like, how is Northern Ireland in, like, from your perspective, the healthcare system in Northern Ireland? We know of the NHS. And how do you think this has supported your wife's diabetes management? And what changes would you like to see to improve for care for people living with diabetes in your region?
First of all, we're very fortunate that insulin is free to the user. That, beyond anything, makes a huge difference. But if we're getting into the specifics, healthcare is not as good as it was previously. It is not particularly well joined up for diabetes care. When Dawn was first diagnosed, there would have been clinics which she was invited to attend, and they would have covered all aspects of diabetes care, from your feet to your eyes, your HbA1c, all in together in a clinic, which kind of made sense, certainly for the person attending. And I think it also made sense from an organizational point of view of a healthcare provider. But that doesn't happen now. In fact, done several years without having any diabetes appointment fulfilled. So there's a lack of funding just in our model. It's funded, it is the NHS. It has definitely degraded, partly deliberately, by people that believe a different privatized system is better. But that only serves people who can afford it. So it could be improved by more joined up thinking. By being more proactive, you would limit the number of health complications years down the line. Quick example, a friend of one of my sons, early 20s, type 1 diabetic for a number of years. And basically, he was treated on the same basis as how technology was when he was diagnosed, essentially as a young teenager, until Dawn spoke to him and said, hang on, you should be able to ask for the continuous glucose monitor. By asking, he got it, but he didn't know to ask, so there was no proactive input from the health system. He basically would have rung up, asked for a repeat prescription. So we're very fortunate in the sense that, yes, this is largely, but it could be so much better in its implementation. So.
Maybe one to from Rio. There are so many issues. Anita, I remember, I think a month ago, she traveled to Singapore to get these insulin pumps. What is available? Like, how accessible are diabetes supplies in Indonesia?
Yeah, in Indonesia, to my government, maybe to helping to drip and then injection to the insulin. And then pump and CGM.
Wow, what an incredible session. I don't know about you, but I feel so inspired after hearing all these stories, the love, the resilience, the partnership. So huge thanks to you, Rio, Roger, and Bao, for being so open, real, and absolutely hilarious today. I don't know if you have any last words to our audience. Last words. I'm not asking any question, but if you have any last words that you want to say, please go ahead before we close.
Thank you very much for organizing this. It's been actually the questions were very inspiring to me, but also hearing from Roger and Rio and yourself. So thank you for organizing. Yeah. And I hope really that this will help others.
I second that, Tino. Thank you so much. It's really important work that you're doing. Well done.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
from me too. Thank you very much, Mr. Tino, Mr. Roger, and Mr. Brown. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Seeing some familiar faces. So this was a reminder that being a caregiver is not just about managing diabetes, but it's about being a teammate in life, sharing both the highs and the lows. To all our listeners, I hope you've gained much inspiration and insight, as I have, from these amazing gentlemen. And I don't forget to keep spreading the love or supporting your loved ones and staying tuned for more fantastic episodes. So until next time, take care, stay strong, and keep living your best life with whatever comes up your way. Just embrace it. So thank you so much for being part of this podcast. This was amazing for me. And thank you for taking your time. I know it's early in the morning for Bob. Your routine, usually you'd have to wake up 30 minutes later, but you were to wake up 30 minutes early. And for Roger, it's actually in the afternoon. You could be having your lunch, but now it's going to be a delayed lunch. And for Rio, yes, it's in the evening. You're 5 hours ahead of me. So now I think it's almost 9 p.m. But thank you. And I know most of the time you'll be sleeping, but you're here. So I cannot thank you enough for all that. I have all this information because I'm a great friend of your wives, all of you. So I know so much about these things. So thank you so much for being here
Thank
with
you.
us.